So now I'd like to invite Mindy Craig, the owner of BluePoint Planning, offers over 25 years of experience providing policy and strategic planning, communications, and stakeholder engagement services to organizations throughout California and the country with a focus on energy efficiency, zero net energy, and sustainability. Mindy was the lead author of California's new residential ZNE action plan, and existing buildings energy efficiency action plan. She's currently working with local governments, 3 RENs, as well as developing the commercial buildings ZNE action plan. In addition, Mindy is the lead facilitator for the statewide residential energy efficiency home upgrade working group and is a consultant on various local and regional government efforts related to sustainability, resiliency, and energy efficiency programs and policies. Thank you, Mindy.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I guess I get the last word here in terms of the presentations, but it's a quick word. So while Edgar's getting my slides up, just want to talk about, I've been working on this stuff since about 2011, and the conversation has changed drastically. Carbon wasn't even mentioned in the first 5 years, and when we did the residential ZNE action plan, it's like, yeah, carbon, sure. It wasn't even part of the conversation, which is just sort of mind-blowing right now. And so when we look at so now I'm in the middle and have been for quite a while trying to get the commercial action plan updated. And why it's been challenging is this conversation has been so dynamic, and trying to keep up with it and to do a very comprehensive and right approach to it is really challenging. We're the geeks here. We love this stuff, but I'm sure when you go and talk to city council members or people in the planning department, they look at you and they're like, duck curve, grid friendly, that's not part of our discussion, right? And so this is a challenge. How do we actually get this thing going on the ground when it's not just us geeks hanging out? So that's what I'm going to talk about today a little bit. Everyone else talked about a lot of other things, so hopefully this will work. Let's see. There we go. We heard this already, don't need to go into that. So we're working on a plan, and ultimately it's to align market with the policy. And where we've been is talking about building ZNE, and you've heard a lot about that today. And we're changing it to say we need to have a much more holistic approach to this, one that's a distributed energy resources. We think about EE storage, we think of controls, and we think about all the different elements, community scale, instead of just thinking of it as a single unit. And we think there's a lot of power in this, not only just the way we can finance it, the way we can save costs. There's a whole bunch of elements that really make this much more effective. And so we're going to update our goal here. You saw earlier that it was 2030, all new buildings go to ZNE and 50% of existing buildings. We're now changing this, and it's now beginning in 2030, all new commercial buildings and the major renovations of existing buildings achieve zero net energy performance, either on-site or off-site, and grid optimization. So we're talking about a couple different things here that I think hopefully provides a performance approach rather than a prescriptive approach, and helps us move in the right direction. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is that ZNE buildings and districts, community scale, you can call it whatever you like, are integrated by key distributed resources, and reduce carbon emissions, enhance customer experience, and create more resilient communities. That last one is really resonating today. Our friends in Sonoma and Napa, not to mention Puerto Rico and Houston, this is a big deal. And so what we're looking at is the drivers. How do we drive this? Well, clearly we have a huge driver, especially at the CPUC, which is $1 billion of energy efficiency funding that can go with the program. So how do we use that? How do we leverage that? But also, how do we have informed customer decisions? And I'm actually going to talk mostly about that one today. We're going to develop a tool that we're hoping that folks here can use that to go from geek language to layperson get language to actually have a better conversation around these issues. We also think this integrated ZNE districts is a big move. And when we talk about that, we're actually thinking both commercial and residential. So that's a little bit different here. We are going to add like kind of the large scale community element into this plan, in part because it's a different conversation than we had with the existing res plan, but also just so it makes sense to us. Obviously, we need to continue to research and development, and then codes and standards. And what we want to make sure is that codes and standards is not the end all. It is the baseline. We create a great baseline with codes and standards, and then we continue to go and innovate above that. So this decision-making tool, or maybe it's a discussion tool. It's something that's come out of a lot of conversations. It's come out of some of my discussions with Sonoma and how people are trying to get their heads around these really complex ideas. You know, how do we think about a district approach to this? You know, it's complicated enough to just think about the land use issues, the zoning issues, urban design, and now you want us to talk about energy storage, and duck curves. It's really challenging. So how can we do something different? So what we're working on is a discussion tool or decision-making tool that has the CPUC and our policy agencies, which bake in, if you will, the idea of grid-friendly, locational value, cost-effectiveness, equity for ratepayers, all these other elements. But then it is actually driven by customer needs and decisions. Oops. So what does that mean? Whoa, long way. Sorry. So, and it's also, so the key thing is that we're looking at who are decision makers at this level. We think it's clearly developers, community developers, all of you, local government. You guys have a huge role. We talked about all the policies that are coming out. So how do we make sure you're getting the right policy? How do you make sure that you're able to communicate what policy should be going in and what does it look like? Obviously, having model ordinances is a good start, but we need more of that. And then property owners, particular campus size. So that could be a corporate campus. It could be a community college campus, lots of different campuses. We also want to make architects and builders and energy consultants to be part of this conversation. So the concept is, first, we identify different paths to ZNE, and I'll talk about that in a second. Second is we define what are customer objectives for going to ZNE. I'm going to go into this too. What are the CPUC sort of state agency values for these different paths? How do we say, you know, sustainability, for instance, is one of our objectives. How do different paths around ZNE actually work with sustainability? And then we let customers prioritize their objectives. And then we get a couple options for them to then explore and cost out. The idea is that we create some better decisions with a customer choice. So what we're doing is there's about maybe 6, 7 paths to ZNE we're talking about. There's building scale with on-site solar only, which is pretty much what we're getting across the state right now, lots and lots of that. To the whole buildings, I think we have 1,500 ZNE homes, and I think Rory's slide was on the ZNE commercial buildings that MBI does. Not a lot, but that's all we're doing now. In that Newhall Ranch, those 21,000 homes are supposed to be solar only, which is a challenge. Then we have the building scale, which is solar plus storage. Community scale, just solar, wind, will be more broad on our renewables there. Or community solar plus storage, which I think is a big option, and then different kinds of microgrids, and then finally the utility scale out in the desert somewhere. And then the objectives, these are the things that I'm actually going to ask you guys for some help on. These are things that we think are more important to the local governments and the decision makers. Do we want sustainability? Do we want resiliency? Do we want asset control? Do we want to have architectural flexibility? So one of the things that we know is developers like dormers, and they like different things going on, and they don't work with solar panels on the roof. So maybe they need to have a different choice. Economic development is a huge element. Can that be baked into a decision tool? Local energy supply sometimes is a value that we want to do. So there's a lot of different objectives that are more interesting and a more valuable, perhaps, conversation with local governments, decision makers, than, again, talking about the duck curve. And then we have lots of other considerations that we're going to try and use as a conversation with this. And so what does it look like? So ultimately, what you see here is I just took a couple of the different potential paths. And on the right side over here, you see the value and the score. So the value there would be what I would call the state agency value. These are just placeholders right now. So, you know, for instance, on the value for sustainability, it might be a 4, resiliency, and this is on what is a storage on site, you know, and then each one is valued separately. And then here we have our objectives. And the yellow column is what the local government or the decision maker might say. So this is how they value these different objectives. And what you get at the end of the day is, well, based on this, you might want to look further into a community scale or some sort of a microgrid. You might also have somebody who is more of an economically focused, not so sustainability oriented. So they don't really value sustainability so much. Yeah, resiliency is pretty important, but wow, cost, financing, I really care about that. And so for them, they actually should look at the solar and storage on site, but they also might also look at the community based. So this tool is something we're trying to develop. And as we get into the weeds, we see, there's so many different options. Are we have existing buildings? Are we doing all new buildings? Are we land constrained? There's a whole bunch of different things, but I am hoping to maybe get some people who are interested in working with me on vetting this out and helping to get this going. We really want to get it out the door and live by the end of this year. So November 7th, we're going to be doing a focus group here at ABAG. 10 to noon, and we're hoping to get like 10 or 12 people from the local government and anybody else here in the room to come and join us and work through some of these things. Does this make sense? Can you actually use this? How would you use this? And then make sense of it. We're also working again with the CEC and the CPUC on sort of that values piece. But at the end of the day, what we really think this might do is you would take those objectives and you would just focus on those. You would have a list of talking points and conversation points to work with a city council person or a staff person. Say, let's talk about what do we think about these things. So you don't have to, again, get into the nitty gritty of, well, we really need storage because it's going to balance the load and we'll get our flying duck rather than our big fat duck. So those are like getting glazed eyes. So anyway, that's the end of this. So the next step, so we're going to test this out, develop it, and complete the commercial action plan all by the end of this year. And of course, we'll be coordinating it with the other agencies. And I think that's it. And I think